are listening to or watching the We Are West Ham podcast, and this is the Opposition View with me, Will Pugh, ahead of this weekend's game against Nottingham Forest away in the Premier League on Sunday, fresh off of the back of our third defeat of the season, a late collapse at Wolves after being 2-1 up to lose 3-2. We're going to the Midlands again this weekend, and I can't really see at this stage any other outcome other than we saw at Molineux on Tuesday evening. I'm delighted to say, though, that joining us from the 1865 Nottingham Forest podcast is Adam. Adam, brilliant to have you on, mate. Thanks very much for joining us. You have had basically a mirror image sort of recent period, last season particularly, and it looks like probably the same this time around, as we had sort of 3 to 4 years ago now, playing a bit more of a pragmatic style of football under a pragmatic manager in Nuno Espirito Santo, but it is bearing huge amounts of fruit. You obviously got into the Europa League this season after initially qualifying for the Conference League, and then all the drama with Palace and them getting demoted because of the ownership rules. But you've started the season with a win and a draw. You're fifth in the league. It's hard, from my point of view, not to look on with a little bit of envy and go, oh, we had that a while ago. That looks fun.
Yeah, it's a really exciting time to be a Forest fan. You know, we've had a pretty crazy couple of weeks, I must say, you know, off the field, which is not new for Forest fans. Marinakis, although he is a fantastic owner and we all love him, does certainly attract controversy. So we've been very much sitting on our hands in the last sort of week or so, worried about Nuno, but hopefully it looks like it's all sort of ironed itself out and we're all going to be okay. So yeah, we've got a lot to look forward to.
So just remind people, in case I have missed that, Adam, what's the story there?
Yeah, so it was a bit of a weird one. So Nuno, it started really because Nuno did an interview for Sky Sports and said, essentially, we're not ready. You know, we've not signed who we wanted to sign. We're not ready for the season. And then we go and, you know, pretty convincingly beat Brentford. So
3-1 was that opening day?
3-1, yeah. 3-0 up at half time. And to be fair, second half, we just sort of took the foot off the gas a little bit.
Yeah.
You know, so it looked like everything was all rosy and everything was fine. We signed a couple of players, obviously James McAtee, Murray Hutchinson, Armand Calamendo. And it looked as if we were sort of heading in the right direction. And then Douglas Luiz signed as well. Now, Douglas
Luiz held on to Gibbs-White.
Yes. That was the big one. I know a lot of people banter us for that with Marinakis. It did look like the picture when Morgan was speaking that it looked a bit hostage situation like, but you know, it's
stiff Tottenham, so we were all laughing at it, mate.
Well, I think everyone's avoided Tottenham this transfer window, haven't they? Really, so that is a bit of a smile for you guys. But yeah, so everything looked good, and then Nuno came out in his press conference and essentially just said there's no real relationship with myself and the owner, which we were all a bit sort of confused by because they only gave him a new contract a couple of months ago for 3 years. So it seemed like everything was fine. It then later came out that it seems like Nuno's biggest issue is with Edu. Obviously, we've got Edu from Arsenal to do a lot of the recruitment drive and all that sort of thing. And
he's working across, sorry to interrupt, he's working across Marinakis' like football group, right? Because Marinakis is involved in Olympiacos, is it? And then some other clubs?
Yes, so Olympiacos, and then we've got I think he's got Vasco da Gama, I think it is in Brazil.
Oh, yeah, in Brazil, right, yeah.
And then Monza as well. So he's got building this sort of empire, and then, yes, Edu is kind of part of all of it.
Yeah.
Because getting Edu out of Arsenal wasn't an easy task, and I think it probably cost a little bit of money to do as well. So Edu is someone that Marinakis thinks very highly of, and his recruitment for Forest has been fantastic. From a fan perspective, you know, I'm really happy with all of our signings, and I feel like we've recruited well, and we've probably got 1 or 2 more to add, and I think we'll add the right players. But Nuno seemingly wasn't happy with his relationship with Edu. I don't know the ins and outs, whether that's to do with particular players. There was a rumour about Traore from Fulham that Nuno wanted to bring in, and that didn't materialise for whatever reason.
He played under him at Wolves, right?
Yeah, and I think that the way we played last season with the counter-attacking football, Elanga was used as, you know, someone that you need a lot of pace on the counter-attack, and Traore, through his maybe lack of end product, he does get at players, and he is obviously very fast. So
yeah.
I think that Nuno
he carries the ball up the pitch effectively, doesn't he? At least
he does, and I think that Nuno probably saw him as a natural successor to Elanga, and didn't really work out. And we didn't sign him, and we signed Dan Ndoye from Bologna, who isn't that sort of player. He's more of a technical player, and he's obviously started the season brilliantly. So it's a weird situation because, from a fan perspective, I'd love to be able to say that one of them's in the right, one of them's in the wrong. The only thing I would say is that I don't think that airing your dirty laundry to the press was probably a good idea from Nuno.
Yeah.
But as it stands, we still have a manager, and hopefully bridges are being built.
Yeah, totally. I saw links to Ange Postecoglou at one stage. I guess there's maybe the Greek link there. I don't know if that's if I'm reading too much into that or not. That would seem an awful lurch in style from Nuno to Ange, would it not?
Yeah, I think that link was just putting 2 and 2 together because Ange
coming up with 6.
Yeah, exactly. Ange and Marinakis are friends, so I think that was the natural link, but. I think you ask most Forest fans. I don't think any Forest fans sees Ange as an upgrade over Nuno, certainly. So
quite. I'm not sure any Tottenham fans did by the end of it, to be fair. So just talk to us a little bit then about the first couple of games of the season. Like you say, you beat Brentford comprehensively. Chris Wood, sort of one of the most effective but unfashionable strikers in the Premier League. He's really sort of seems to be playing the best football of his career. With you guys, been about a bit, always been a thoroughly decent professional and performed well wherever he's been. You seem to be getting the best out of him, but I say it's easy to sort of tar Nuno and managers generally with that. Or they're a little bit conservative with that slightly defensive brush. But you've got some really talented flair players mixed in there, and it seems to be bearing fruit for you. Is that going to be the same approach this season? What we've seen in the opening 2 games so far?
Yeah, so I think going into the season, pre-season was pretty uneventful for us. We scored 2 goals in pre-season, and we kept 5 clean sheets. We're 5-0-0. So it seemed like more of the same. Solid defensively, maybe sort of struggling to create chances, and then first game of the season happens, and that all goes out the window. Because we created lots of chances. And I think a lot of people probably expected a drop-off from Chris Wood just purely for age. And obviously towards the end of last season, he did drop off a little bit. But we probably dropped off quite a lot as a team. So that thought process went out the window when Wood scored 2 goals on opening day. And everything seemed fine. The Palace game was a strange one because I personally think we were the better side. And Palace, you would expect later in the second half, would be looking a little bit leggy, having played in Europe on the Thursday night and played a really strong side in Europe. And that was definitely the case. We brought on some players and we could have nicked it at the end. Amari Hutchinson had a couple of really good chances to finish it off. Igor Jesus hit the post. We looked like we probably could have nicked it there at the end. But I think if we had won, I think it would have been fairly deserved. So, yeah, we were 4 points out of 6 and we could very well be 6 out of 6, really.
Yeah, sure. What did you make of that Gibbs-White situation? Because he, it appeared like he wanted the move to Tottenham. I know the hostage situation memes have gone round, which are all sort of very funny, but ultimately there was that belief that it felt like one of those things, right? Marinakis going, I don't know how he found out about the release clause. Everyone in football is aware of what players' release clauses are because players tell their agents tell people all the time. That's just how it works. So sort of the faux outrage about how could they possibly know seemed a little bit sort of disingenuous, I suppose, from Marinakis, but he's well within his rights, I suppose, as what ended up happening to offer him a new contract and make him stay. There seemed to be a sense that there was a little bit more to that, I think, going on behind the scenes, maybe some sort of like disputes, I think, previous disputes between agencies and that sort of thing. And maybe some points were being proven in the story. But how did you sort of feel it, like the outcome of it in the end? Do you feel it's a good thing for Forest, or do you think, because sometimes it's one of them, as we're seeing at Newcastle, obviously, when a player kind of decides they want to leave, it's not always as frustrating as it can be for fans sometimes, particularly when players have got contracts. It's not always the best outcome for them to stick around if they don't want to be there. But what did you make of all of that?
It was certainly strange. I think it was a very unique situation. Usually we hear a release clause is triggered and that's it. It's up to the player. If the player wants to go, they'll agree terms, they'll go. Now, it seemed like Morgan was probably interested in the Tottenham move, probably because, to work under Thomas Frank's a really good manager and to play Champions League football. And obviously, World Cup year, you've got your opportunity to go and put yourself in the limelight for Thomas Frank at a Champions League club. So I understood it from his perspective. Now, from the Forest perspective, we put a new contract on the table last summer to him.
Right.
He only had 1 year left on his deal this year. So it was very much, let's put a new contract in front of him. And he hadn't signed it for whatever reason. It's personal to him, I suppose. But so this summer, when we heard the news, well, there's a contract in front of him, but he doesn't, he's not going to sign it. And there's a release clause. And Fabrizio Romano gives it the here we go. And it's, it's end of story. He's gone. Now, the legal dispute, from my understanding, comes from the fact that when you find out about a release clause, you have to go through the proper channels to find out about the release clause. Spurs apparently didn't. They went through the back door finding this release clause, and that went against the transfer rules that all clubs are, governed by.
I just think that happens so often, though, these days, isn't it? I think it's a bit like you never hear of tapping up stories anymore because it's so commonplace. No one, and they're all doing it to each other, that no one bothers. You know what I mean? It's sort of kind of like calling the police on your neighbour for nicking your microwave if you're like stealing his car at the same time. Do you know what I mean? It's like, it just doesn't happen.
Yeah, I think that it wouldn't have happened. And that's the thing with most owners, they probably would have just said, let it slide. And, but Marinakis isn't that kind of guy. And to be fair to Marinakis, what we believe his opinion to be is that he didn't feel that Tottenham was a big enough step for Morgan. And he clearly seemed to have convinced Morgan that was the case, that Tottenham isn't a massive step forward in your career. When Man City were linked, it was different.
Yeah, sure.
If Man City had come in for him, it would have been different. If Liverpool had come in for him instead of going to Florian Wirtz, it would have been different. But I think that when it's Tottenham, respectfully to Tottenham,
don't have to worry about that on this podcast, mate.
Well, that's true, yeah. But I don't think it's a massive step up from Forest. I don't think currently it is anyway. And he's, club captain at Forest. He's settled his, 2 young kids down in Nottingham and stuff. There's a lot that goes into it from the personal side of things as well.
So does that sort of, reading between the lines maybe, do you get the sense then that although he signed this new contract and the release clause is increased, am I right in saying that?
Yeah, not public knowledge to what the number is, but it's increased significantly was the word.
Yeah. So. Okay. But is the belief then that, okay, he signed a new deal, get some extra wages for the season, it enables Forest to guarantee a little bit more of the value, guarantee a little bit more of a higher sell-on fee, but that you still expect to lose him within the next 12 months?
Yeah. So I would probably expect he leaves next summer. And I think the signings of James McAtee and Amari Hutchinson probably show you that, we're future-proofing that position as well. So, yeah, I would expect he probably does leave next summer.
Right, coming in, let's talk about actual football and West Ham on Sunday. I'll put it off for as long as I can, Adam, by talking about all the other interesting things going on at the opposition fans' clubs when I speak to them. There's a sort of funny little rivalry seems to have developed between West Ham and Forest fans, and it may not be one held on the Forest side of things, to be fair. I think it harks back maybe a couple of seasons, I want to say, when I think I've never seen anything like it. We were absolutely robbed by the referee during a game at the City ground. There was a handball on the line, I think, from one of your players that got missed. This may even be quite a long time ago. But I'm talking about James Jones, my co-host in particular. I'm not really fussed either way, but he's developed quite a rapid hatred of Nottingham Forest, all based on that one game, I think. And then you've probably just beaten us loads since. So he's just absolutely infuriated every time we play Forest. Is it the same thing from the Forest side of things? Or are you, as lots of fans do, just sort of like, what? You're pathetic. Shut up. I don't know what you're talking about.
So I think for me personally, I definitely had some grief with West Ham about Mikel Antonio, because that was when I was growing up. Mikel Antonio was my favourite Forest player, and then he left, and that was pretty tough. But obviously since then, I went to Upton Park and watched us in the FA Cup get battered when we were in the Championship, and then more recent times I've been to the Olympic Stadium when we got beat when we came up. I think that it was the first game, well, our first home game of the season, the first game back in the Premier League.
That's it. I knew it was early, yeah.
We won 1-0, and we were pretty average that day. And
Who was your manager then? Was it
Steve Cooper? Yeah, it was Steve Cooper, yeah. We were pretty average that day. And Taiwo Awoniyi scored off his shin. Had no idea he'd scored it. And we won 1-0. It was a proper messy performance, yeah. I'm sure it's probably come from that a little bit because there was a
I think it was, yeah. I can't remember who it was on the line. But there was, it was one of those games I think we walked away from being like, how on earth have we not won that, let alone lost it? But yeah, so what are you? I mean, obviously our start to the season has been absolutely abject. I think people thought I was being tongue in cheek last week when before the Chelsea game I predicted we would lose 5-1. It was a genuine prediction about what would happen. I kind of predicted we'd lose at Wolves last night. That's exactly what happened, though. We did look a bit more like a proper football team for the sort of first 80 minutes of the game, something like that. But again, we played there or thereabouts our strongest side, give or take 2 or 3 positions. It was a very strong team. Lucas Paqueta, Thomas Souček, who scored, shock. Jarrod Bowen's on there. Aguerd, obviously Areola was in goal, but he's been Mads Hermansen's been terrible since he came in. And we still... Obviously, Strand Larsen comes off the bench. I know he's been linked with Newcastle and he's a very good centre forward, but he comes off the bench. And we just totally collapse again. Had Jarrod Bowen's sort of arguing with the away fans after the game. The one man in our team, by the way, who can actually hold his head up high based on how he's conducted himself at the club in recent times. It's all pretty chaotic at the moment. What's your sort of stance on things, West Ham, and how do you see the game on Sunday?
Yeah, so it's a bit of a strange one for me because I didn't watch. It was the first game of the season, but I saw it on Match of the Day, and it felt a bit weird. It felt like the turning point was Juve's cleared off the line shot, and it felt like that was the turning point in the game where because West Ham started okay, that didn't go in. Sunderland, got their backups from it and thought, we're going to have a go at it, and West Ham just couldn't contain Sunderland, which
exactly.
It's probably quite a worrying start to the season. Totally. And I watched the Chelsea game, and again, I think you started quite brightly. Obviously, the goal came from absolutely nothing. It's just an absolute worldie by Paqueta, but But again, as soon as Chelsea scored, just completely had no ideas.
Well, we had one disallowed, didn't we? Just after they equalised.
Awkward one, yeah.
Yeah, that's it. And again, but literally from then. It was like, no, well, that's it then. Like, we've had 10 minutes of effort, looking really good and like a normal football team. And we just go, no, that's it. And just letting teams walk the ball. It was just like, I always say my stance on opposition goals and when West Ham lose games, if you've watched a game of football, you'd always do it again. Man United, or I remember Gareth Bale doing it for Tottenham a few times. If you're watching West Ham play another team and they produce an amazing goal, whether it's well worked or an absolute rocket from 25, 30 yards, you kind of go, hands up, we've been beaten by good football, like by the other team being a bit more skillful or doing something a bit better than we have, which is sort of fair enough. But as long as we've made them work for it, you never really mind. But I mean, the goals against Sunderland, so worrying, all of them coming from wide areas or set pieces. And the same thing against Chelsea. And it's just like Chelsea sort of had to put like 4 out of 10 effort in to put 5 goals past us, which is extremely worrying. The goals against Wolves last night. Strand Larsen comes on and does well, obviously. But yeah, we just look devoid of so much that you need to win football games and win them regularly. I am still of the belief we'll have enough to stay up. But how do you see it all sort of going on Sunday, sort of game wise? What will your team be? How do you think the actual match will play out?
Yeah, I mean, if you're struggling against wide players and set pieces, then playing Forest isn't the one for you because we score a lot from set pieces. And Dan Ndoye's had a great start to the season, as has Callum Hudson-Odoi. So I think that's going to be an issue for West Ham. I think it's interesting to listen to you talking about, I think you'll stay up, as if that's the goal for West Ham, like personnel. That's the thing. I mean, it's a weird one for me that's a conversation we're having about where you are, but I suppose it's just you playing who you are. But I mean, look, on Sunday, I think I really can't see anything but a Forest win. And I think if we play like we did against Brentford, I just don't think West Ham will have an answer to that at all. And we
just talk me through a bit. What we'll give some detail on that, Adam. How is it you will play? How is it you expect to play on Sunday? And you did against Brentford.
So we've actually changed the style of play from last season. So it towards the end of last season, you could either blame it on fatigue, getting found out, injuries, whatever you want to blame it on. But our counter-attacking style of play wasn't effective anymore. So this season we've sort of changed that a little bit. There was a stat from the Brentford game which is really interesting. We had the most possession in a game for the first time since March 2022 when we played at home to West Brom in the Championship. Other than that, we haven't had more possession in a game. So that's a complete change of style. We've got a lot more ball players in the team now. Elliot Anderson is absolutely fantastic. I couldn't wax lyrical about him enough. He's absolutely fantastic. And the way that he starts moves from that sort of 6 into an 8 position. We're going to have more of the ball. We're going to have players that are comfortable on the ball. And that's something that we've brought this season that we didn't have last season. It's a similar personnel, but it seems like this team is more comfort on the ball. So the way that we're breaking teams down is just having a lot of the ball, but then also getting in behind with the wide players we have. And if the wide players try and get in behind and can't, you've got Morgan in the 10 spot. You've got Anderson that goes and plays 6, 8, and 10 throughout the game, takes up those positions. I don't think teams will find a way past that, because then when we bring on your subs, we've got more depth now as well. So I think that's how we're breaking teams down slowly. But if we get the early goal like we did against Brentford, they just collapsed after we scored the first goal. And based on what I've seen from West Ham so far, I think if Forest just get the early goal and we can still control the game, it's potentially
game over.
The same. Yeah, I would think so.
Yeah. I mean, we had a Charlie, the Chelsea fan, on ahead of last week, and he was trying to be pragmatic about, every game in the Premier League is difficult. It's like, some of them aren't, Charlie, frankly. And the way we're showing up at the moment, unfortunately, Adam, I'm sort of inclined to agree with you. What's the just quickly before we let you go? What's the sort of feeling among fans at the moment? Are Nottingham Forest quite a unified fan base? Are there any issues that sort of split them at all, or because I always find that to be an interesting question of opposition fans, because it's all sort of easy to be unified when things are going well, but given, like I say, there's always an interesting story out of Forest with the owners and stuff. Is there any issues that sort of divide the fans? Are you all pretty united behind the manager?
Yeah, I think we're pretty good as a fan base at the minute. There was a lot of discussion about Nuno and in the way that he dealt with things last week, but I don't think there was any real discussion about whether he should be Forest manager or not. I think it was pretty unified that everybody felt that Nuno was the right man for the job and got us back into Europe for the first time since the 90s and stuff. So it's definitely, for me, I think that we are pretty happy with how everything's going at the minute. And the only thing that we've had a big disagreement on, and it's really silly, the fan base is very split on signing the fullback from Leicester. I think it's Christensen's his name.
Right.
And I think it's purely because some fans are saying, he's not this good. He's not better than Harry Toffolo, who we let go. But I think it's the only thing I can pick at that we're sort of disagreed on at the minute.
Yeah.
And he's going to be a backup fullback, which is pretty crazy. It's the only thing we've got.
Which is ultimately the sort of quite a nice sign, really, of a unified fan base, if you're arguing over a backup fullback. Listen, Adam, it's been absolutely brilliant having you on the podcast. Thanks very much for joining us. Adam there from the 1865 podcast, the Nottingham Forest pod, of course. Looking ahead to Sunday's game at the City Ground. Bleak times indeed for West Ham. Just quickly, Adam, before we let you go, what's the score going to be?
Jeez. 4-0. I'm not. I could sit here and say, we'll sneak a 1-0, but I feel comfortable.
Like I say, we've conceded in all of our games so far this season. We've conceded 11 goals in 3 games, so it's not the wildest suggestion whatsoever. I would like to think that Graham Potter will sort of have enough nous about him to just try and go and close out the game entirely, but I don't think he's got that in him, and just try and sort of shut things down and get a point if we can, which, to be fair, given this position we're in, not that it'll be pretty, it'll be ugly, in fact, but should be the approach for every away game this season. It's just try and make ourselves hard to beat. Whether that will happen or not, I don't know. So I'm going to say I think it will be a little bit more conservative than previously. You conceded many goals? You look susceptible at the back at all?
I conceded 2 in the 2 games, and one of them was a penalty. So
one of them, yeah, okay. All right then. Well, in that case, I mean we've scored 0-1, then 2. So maybe I'll go 3-3. What's the chances of that? I think absolutely 0. But listen, Adam, thanks very much for coming on. We really appreciate it. Thanks for listening, everyone. Don't forget to follow us on socials at @WeAre_West Ham on Twitter. We are West Ham Pod on Instagram. Subscribe to the YouTube channel. And if you want to get all these podcasts a day before everyone else and listen without adverts, you can subscribe on patreon.com/WeAreWestHam Podcast.